Marcus Hill never believed in bad omens, but the night he decided to rob the small convenience store at the edge of town, he noticed the parking lot was completely empty. Not a single car, not even the hum of traffic on the road outside. His partner Tyler Graves waited in the shadows, gripping the crowbar with white knuckles, while Marcus adjusted his mask and whispered silent promises to himself that this would be quick, clean, easy. But the moment they stepped inside, the air felt wrong, stale, heavy, carrying the faint metallic stench of something rotten. The shelves looked ordinary at first glance, yet both men swore items shifted when they weren't looking. By the time the register drawer slid open on its own, revealing nothing but deep fresh claw marks carved into the steel, Marcus realized they hadn't broken into a store at all. They had walked into something else entirely. The night wrapped itself around the store like a heavy blanket, pressing in on me from every angle. I had always hated late shifts, but tonight felt different. The silence was too sharp, too complete, as though the world outside had been switched off. Even the hum of the old refrigerator in the back seemed muffled, as if it too was afraid to make a sound. I tried to keep busy, telling myself that a quiet night was better than one full of loud, drunk customers, but the longer I stayed alone, the louder my own thoughts became. The fluorescent lights above me flickered now and then, buzzing like angry insects, and every time they dimmed I felt a rush of cold crawl up my spine. I focused on stocking the shelves, moving cans and bottles with mechanical precision, anything to keep my mind from wandering into the places it wanted to go. Yet, no matter how much I tried, my eyes kept darting toward the front doors. The glass panes looked out onto the empty sidewalk, and the reflection of the store's light made it hard to see what lay beyond. Still, I thought I caught movement there more than once, a shadow drifting past, a blur in the corner of my vision. Each time I whipped my head toward the doors, there was nothing. Just stillness. Just silence. I tried to shake it off, but my body betrayed me. My heart had begun to beat faster, and I couldn't keep my hands steady. The cans rattled against each other, echoing too loudly in the quiet room. I crouched down to grab another box, desperate to finish so I could retreat behind the counter where at least I felt a little less exposed. That was when I noticed it. At first, I thought it was just a stain. Something spilled and left to dry on the floor behind the register. But when I leaned closer, I realized the marks weren't stains at all. They were scratches, long deep grooves etched into the white tile. I ran my fingers over them and a shiver tore through me. These weren't the kind of marks you'd see from moving boxes or dragging metal shelves. They were thin, sharp, jagged, almost like fingernails had scraped desperately at the ground, over and over, until the surface gave way. The image planted itself in my mind instantly. Someone on their knees, clawing at the floor, leaving behind a history of their terror for me to find. My throat tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I pushed back from the counter, nearly knocking over the stool behind me, and stood staring down at the scratches. They seemed to pulse in the fluorescent glow, catching the light in a way that made them shimmer faintly, as if they were fresh. I tried to tell myself it was old damage. Maybe the store had been robbed before, long before I ever worked here. Maybe someone had tried to break into the safe, had clawed at the tiles in frustration. That explanation was thin, but I clung to it. Because the alternative that someone had been here, trapped, suffering, trying to escape was too much to bear. The air felt heavier now, thick with a presence I couldn't name. I went back to stacking the shelves, forcing myself to move faster, but my ears strained for every sound. A soft thud came from the back storage room. I froze, the can still in my hand. My chest tightened as I listened. Nothing followed. I told myself it was just something shifting, a box settling, maybe the building itself creaking with age. But the thought didn't calm me. By the time I placed the last can onto the shelf, sweat had gathered at the back of my neck. I turned toward the counter, determined to sit down, to take my eyes off the floor, to pretend I hadn't seen anything strange. But when I looked again, the scratches seemed longer than before, stretching further across the tile, creeping toward the spot where I stood. My stomach flipped, and I nearly dropped the box. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and when I opened them again, the marks were the same as before, short, confined, nothing unusual at all. My mind was playing tricks on me. That was the only explanation. At least, that's what I told myself as I sank into the chair behind the register, pretending to relax, though every nerve in my body screamed at me that something was very, very wrong. The minutes dragged like hours, each tick of the clock sharp enough to make me flinch. I couldn't stop glancing at the floor, at those faint grooves carved into the tiles. And though I wanted to believe they were nothing more than old forgotten scars, deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't finished, that whatever had made them would be back, that maybe it never really left at all. And as the lights flickered one more time, plunging the store into a brief suffocating darkness, I swore I heard the faintest sound of nails dragging slowly across the floor beneath my feet. I tried to convince myself the noise was in my head, just the aftershock of staring too long at those strange scratches, but the thought wouldn't settle. The store felt alive now, as if every shelf, every aisle, every inch of the place was aware of me. I couldn't keep still. My eyes kept jumping to the black security monitors above the counter, their low hum filling the silence like an electronic heartbeat. The screens cycled slowly between aisles, flashing each empty corridor one after the other. It should have been comforting to see nothing there, but instead the emptiness unnerved me even more. I leaned closer, my fingers tightening around the counter's edge, my breath fogging the dusty glass of the monitor. On one screen, I saw myself hunched behind the register, staring back. For a moment I thought it was just a camera feed catching up, a small lag, but then something froze inside me. On the screen, my reflection didn't move the way I did. My real self leaned forward and exhaled, but the figure on the screen didn't move at all. It just stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly, eyes locked straight into the lens. I blinked hard, rubbed at my eyes, and looked again. My body shifted in the chair, but the version of me on the monitor stayed frozen, its face pale and stiff. My heart slammed against my ribs, and for a terrifying second I thought maybe the monitor had broken, maybe it was stuck on an old frame. But then the screen glitched, flickering with static, and when it cleared, the figure had changed. The other me was smiling. Not a normal smile. It was stretched, wrong, as though someone had taken my face and pulled the corners upward with hooks. My stomach turned as my real reflection finally moved, tilting its head in a way I hadn't. The longer I stared, the more I realized it wasn't copying me anymore. It was doing its own thing, as if I were the reflection and it was the one alive. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over the stool. The sound of it hitting the floor snapped me out of my paralysis, but I couldn't bring myself to look away from the screens. The other me kept grinning, eyes locked on the camera. Then, without warning, all the monitors went dark at once. Just blank, lifeless black squares staring down at me. My chest heaved. I pressed my palms to the counter to steady myself, feeling the sweat gather between my fingers. I told myself I should check the cameras, reset them, do something logical, but my body wouldn't obey. It was as if my instincts had taken control, screaming at me to stay still, to remain unnoticed. But unnoticed by what? The silence dragged on, broken only by the faint tick of the wall clock. I swallowed hard and forced myself to glance at the doors. Nothing, just the glass panes reflecting the sterile light of the store. Yet I couldn't shake the image of that twisted reflection staring back at me, as though it was still out there somewhere, watching even without the screens. Finally, after what felt like hours but must have only been minutes, the monitors blinked back on. Each one cycled again, showing empty aisles, empty counters, empty doors. Relief should have washed over me, but instead a heavier dread pressed down because one screen stayed blank. The one directly above my head, the one pointed at the register where I sat. I forced myself to look up at it. Blackness, no static, no glitching, just a void. It was as if the camera had stopped acknowledging me at all. And in that void, for the briefest second, I thought I saw the faintest outline of something moving. A pale hand brushing against the dark, retreating into the nothing. I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward. The crash echoed across the store, and the sound felt like it carried too far. Bouncing off the aisles, swallowed by something unseen. My heart raced, my breathing ragged. I wanted to run, but where would I go? Outside into the deserted night, or stay here with the things creeping just beyond my vision? The air felt colder now, sharp enough that I could see my breath fogging faintly in front of me. I reached down and grabbed the fallen stool with trembling hands, trying to ground myself in the familiar, but the moment I straightened it, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. On one of the working monitors, in the frozen blur between frames, I saw a movement at the end of an aisle. Not me, not anyone I recognized. Just a shape. And when the picture cleared again, the aisle was empty. But a can had rolled slowly across the floor, stopping dead center as though it had been placed there on purpose. The can sat in the center of the aisle like an offering, its metallic surface catching the harsh light. My stomach twisted as I stared at it from behind the counter, every part of me silently begging not to move. But the stillness in the store was unbearable, as if the air itself held its breath, waiting for me to react. I couldn't tear my eyes from that can. Something about the way it sat there, so deliberate, felt wrong. It wasn't just an accident. It was placed. I told myself I needed to check, to prove to myself that nothing was there. My legs resisted, heavy with dread, but slowly I forced them forward. Each step echoed too loudly on the linoleum, bouncing down the aisles in hollow repetition. The closer I got, the colder the air became. When I finally stood over the can, I noticed the label was turned backward, facing the floor. It was identical to the other cans I had stacked earlier, yet its positioning made it seem alien, out of place in its own home. I bent down, my hand trembling as I reached for it. My fingertips barely brushed the cold metal before the overhead lights flickered violently, plunging the store into strobing flashes of white and shadow. In the flicker, the shelves around me seemed to shift. One moment they were neat and orderly, the next they were twisted, items leaning at odd angles, boxes turned away as though they didn't want me to see their labels. In one flash, the aisle stretched longer than it should, a tunnel of endless shelves. In the next, it snapped back to normal. My head spun with nausea as I stumbled backward. When the lights finally steadied, the can was no longer in my hand. I hadn't picked it up, yet it was gone. The empty space on the floor where it had sat burned into my mind. I spun around, scanning the shelves, but it wasn't there either. The air carried a faint acrid scent, now like burnt matches mixed with smoke. I covered my nose instinctively, trying to block it out, but the smell seemed to crawl into my lungs, heavy and suffocating. The bell above the front door suddenly jingled, the sound so sharp in the silence that my whole body jerked. I froze, staring at the glass panes, expecting to see someone standing there. The parking lot stretched into black emptiness, not a single figure in sight, yet the door hung slightly open, swaying gently as if someone had just stepped inside. Cold air poured in, carrying with it the scent of ash. I took a cautious step forward, and that was when I noticed the shelves again. Every single product had shifted. Where neat rows had been moments ago, now the shelves looked wrong. Bottles were turned around, boxes stacked upside down, cans rotated to face away from me. It felt deliberate, as if invisible hands had been at work while my eyes were elsewhere. I spun slowly in place, taking it all in, my chest tightening with each new discovery. The register drawer caught my attention next. From across the store, I could see it hanging open, though I hadn't touched it all night. Even from here, I could see bills missing, gaps where neat stacks of money should have been. The realization hit me like ice water down my spine. I wasn't alone. Someone, or something, was robbing the store right in front of me, yet I couldn't see who. I backed toward the counter, never taking my eyes off the open door. My foot kicked something on the floor and I looked down. There it was, the missing can, but it wasn't the same. The label was smeared with dark streaks, too thick and sticky to be dirt. My throat tightened as I realized it was blood. The lights flickered again, and in the reflection of the front glass door, I saw movement behind me. A shadow, tall and distorted, sliding between the aisles with impossible silence. I spun around, but the aisles were empty, only rows of silent, turned-away products staring into the void. A sudden metallic clang rang out from the storage room in the back, sharp and jarring, followed by the distinct scrape of something dragging across the floor. The sound grew louder, closer, accompanied by the faint rhythm of breathing. Not calm, not human, but wet and labored, each inhale rattling like broken glass. I wanted to run, to burst through the front door and vanish into the night, but my body wouldn't move. My feet felt cemented to the floor, my hands trembling too violently to even reach for my phone. I stood rooted, listening to the slow scrape inching closer, closer, until it seemed to come from just beyond the counter. And then, just as the sound stopped, the register drawer slammed shut with violent force, rattling the entire counter as though unseen hands had claimed it. The drawer slammed so hard it felt like a gunshot in the silence. My whole body jolted, my heart hammering in my throat. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, only stood staring at the register as it quivered from the impact. The air had grown heavy, pressing against my chest, suffocating me with every second. I told myself to calm down, to find something rational to hold on to, but the world around me refused to feel normal anymore. The lights flickered, dimming until only the red glow of the emergency exit sign lit the store. That crimson haze coated everything in a sickly glow, distorting the aisles into endless, twisting corridors. I crouched behind the counter, pressing myself into the shadows, hoping that if I couldn't see whatever was here, it couldn't see me. My breaths came shallow, and each inhale felt too loud, like it would give me away. Then came the sound again, a metallic scrape dragging across the tile. Slow, deliberate, as though someone was pulling something heavy with a sharpened edge. The noise moved from the storage room toward the aisles, each echo bouncing off the walls until I couldn't tell where it came from. My skin prickled, goosebumps crawling up my arms. I clenched my jaw to keep my teeth from chattering, but it didn't help. The sound was too close. I risked a glance over the counter. At first, all I saw was the empty aisles drenched in red light. Then, movement. At the far end, a figure emerged, its steps unnervingly silent compared to the dragging sound that preceded it. The body was wrapped in shadows, its form blending into the darkness as though it wasn't fully solid. But the face had stood out in horrible clarity. It wore a mask, though calling it a mask didn't feel right. It looked stretched, slick, and wet, as though skin had been peeled from a body and pulled tightly over bone. The eyes were black pits, empty and bottomless, yet I felt them lock onto me instantly. Its head tilted slightly, and the gesture was too familiar, too human, as if it had studied how people move but never got it quite right. In one hand, the thing clutched the missing knife from the supply drawer, its blade gleaming faintly in the dim red light. I ducked back down, clutching my knees to my chest. My pulse thundered in my ears, so loud I thought the thing could hear it. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but my legs felt useless, frozen by terror. The scrape of metal echoed again, this time closer, dragging against the tiles in rhythm with my pounding heart. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would pass by, that it would lose interest, that maybe I wasn't the prey it wanted. Minutes stretched into hours. Or maybe it was seconds. Time no longer made sense. Then, silence. A a silence so complete it felt like the world had ended. I opened my eyes slowly, barely daring to breathe. For a moment I thought it was gone. I inched up just enough to peek over the counter again, and what I saw nearly stopped my heart. The figure stood right there, on the other side of the counter, not moving, not breathing, just watching me. Its head tilted again, jerky and unnatural, and the knife glinted as it lifted slightly in its hand. I fell back against the wall, my limbs scrambling to push myself away, though there was nowhere to go. Then, without warning, the overhead lights blazed back on, flooding the store in harsh white light. I blinked rapidly, my eyes stinging, and when they finally adjusted, the figure was gone. The aisles were empty, the air still, as though nothing had ever been there at all. The only proof was the knife, now resting on the counter, its blade stained with something dark that I dared not look at too closely. My chest heaved, relief and dread warring inside me. I told myself I had imagined it, that stress had twisted my mind into hallucinations. But deep down I knew the truth. Something had entered the store. Something had touched the world I lived in. I reached for the knife with trembling fingers, but before I could, the security monitors above flickered to life again. On the screen, the camera over the counter showed me crouched behind it, pale and terrified, and behind me, clear as day, the figure loomed, its mask inches from my head, its black eyes staring directly into the lens as if it knew I was watching. I don't remember how long I sat frozen, staring at that monitor, watching the figure tower behind me. It didn't move, it didn't strike, it only leaned there, silent and watchful, its slick mask inches from the back of my head. I turned slowly, terrified of what I would find. But when my eyes swept over the empty store, there was nothing. No figure, no shadow, no sound. Only me and the suffocating stillness. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt locked, as if the air itself refused to carry my voice. My hands fumbled for my phone. I needed to call someone, anyone, but the screen glowed with the same dead words, no signal. I gripped it tighter, my sweaty fingers sliding over the glass. My breath shook. My only escape, my only tether to the outside world, was useless. Dawn crept slowly into the sky outside, washing the black parking lot in faint gray. Relief almost touched me, like maybe daylight could banish what had crawled into the store. The shelves looked normal again, their products neatly aligned. The scratches on the floor were gone. Even the knife had disappeared from the counter. For a moment, I convinced myself I had fallen asleep, that the whole night had been a trick of exhaustion, but that fragile belief shattered the moment I looked at the register. The drawer hung open again, empty. Every bill, every coin, stripped away. My stomach dropped as I remembered the way the shelves had shifted. The missing items, the cans and bottles turned away as if they were ashamed. It hadn't been chaos for the sake of fear. Something had been stealing, piece by piece, right under my nose. My legs felt weak as I walked to the register, my shoes squeaking against the floor. The drawer was cold, colder than it should have been, as if frost clung to the steel. My hand hovered above it before I forced myself to push it closed. The metallic slam echoed too loudly, filling the space like a gunshot. And in that instant, the security monitors blinked to life again. My breath caught in my throat as I looked up. The screens showed me, just as they always did, slouched and exhausted behind the counter. But this time, the image was wrong in a different way. The store in the footage wasn't the one I stood in. The shelves were bare, stripped of all goods. The lights above flickered dimly, and the glass doors were covered in black stains like soot. And behind the counter, my reflection wasn't tired, it was asleep. I stumbled back, knocking over the stool as I squinted at the screen. The sleeping version of me lay sprawled on the floor, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. My stomach lurched. I wasn't asleep. I was standing right here, wide awake, staring at the monitor. Yet the screen insisted otherwise. Before I could move, the footage changed. A second figure entered the frame, stepping into view with the same dragging, labored motion I had heard all night. The mask gleamed in the dim light, its wet sheen catching every flicker. It crouched beside the sleeping me, its long, spidery fingers brushing strands of hair from my forehead with unsettling tenderness. My chest tightened, nausea flooding me as I watched it stroke the face of the version of me lying helpless on the floor. The thing paused, tilting its head toward the camera. Its black pits for eyes stared straight through the screen, locking onto me. It knew I was watching. It wanted me to see. Slowly, it lifted one blood-stained finger and pressed it against its mask where lips should have been, as if shushing me. The footage stuttered, distorted, but the final frame froze in perfect clarity. The masked figure crouched beside me, its hand still hovering above my chest. I felt a phantom weight there, a pressure against my ribs, as though something invisible pressed down on me in real time. My breath came ragged and uneven, every inhale sharper than the last. The monitors went black. The store plunged into silence again, but the echo of what I had seen lingered in every corner. I wanted to run, to leave everything behind, but when I turned to the glass doors, my heart stopped cold. On the inside of the glass, smeared in something dark and sticky, were the words, "You can't leave." My knees buckled. I pressed my hands to my head, trying to convince myself this was still some fever dream, some hallucination born of exhaustion and fear. But then the faint sound of breathing filled the air again. Wet, rattling, closer than it had ever been. I dared to look back at the counter. The drawer was open once more, wider this time, and inside, glistening in the pale morning light, lay my phone. Its screen flickered to life with a single new video file. My shaking hands reached for it, almost against my will, and I pressed play. The video showed me, exactly as I was now, standing in front of the register, staring at the screen in horror. But behind me, filling the frame, was the figure. Its mask hung inches above my shoulder, its long fingers poised as though ready to wrap around my throat. The footage froze on that image, and the phone screen went black. I didn't dare turn around.